You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. How y'all doing today? Thank you guys for tuning in to this latest episode of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Guys, I want to remind you that the Discord server is up. We are making progress. The Discord server is dedicated to, well, two things. The project, which is the African-centered curriculum, as well as for fans of the podcast to come in and commune with everyone and let's have a good time. More updates will occur with the Discord app. We are the Bitter Medicine Podcast on Discord. That's our server name. Navigate to us. The link is in the chat room right now. We'll have the link posted again later on in the show. Make sure to check it out. Before I start this reading today, so today we're doing some African mythology stories today. We did the same thing about a week ago. We're gonna continue it today. Read a few stories for about an hour. Okay. But as you know, this show is a part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There's this show and there are other shows on the podcast network that you should be checking out.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-Black perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed, and we're back. There's also the Queen's Council podcast. You guys make sure to tune in to all of these shows on the podcast network. I don't talk about those shows. I don't play those spots for no reason. Playing them, so you guys make sure to tune in. Check out all of those shows. Queen's Council and the Harsh Reality Podcast recently had new episodes. You already know Oni Taisei has the Warship for the Pro-Black Perspective podcast on Sundays. He also jumps on other times too. So make sure you go there, like, subscribe, click the bell to be notified when those guys put up new content. All right? So without further ado, let's read these stories. Oh, before I continue with the stories, I want to send a RIP, rest in power, to Cicely Tyson. Cicely Tyson, the actor, who reached 96 years old. Wow. Cicely Tyson had a long life as well as a long career. I think she always made us some kind of proud in the roles that she played, and she will be missed. What's crazy is, I just watched her in a TV show, I want to say a couple months ago, so I'm wondering if it's a COVID related thing, but I watched her on TV just until like 2020 for certain, if not glimpsing her in something in early 2021 here. So rest in power to her, you guys. If you're live with me and you're in the chat room, drop a RIP for Cicely Tyson. If you listen to the playback, comment R.I.P. Cicely Tyson. All right? Okay. You've done that. Let's start reading. So this first reading is from the Zulu people, right? Remember, these are African mythologies, and if you remember, we had a good time reading some of these last week. The truth of the matter being that the way this book is set up is giving you stories from different peoples and regions of the continent. And within these stories typically tend to have animals or what have you in the story. There's opportunities for children to learn language of the peoples, basic greetings and days of the week, etc. Again, we're talking about curriculum building, right, towards nation building. They can study science by studying the animals that appear often in these African mythologies, these African stories, right? They get to study history, they get to study social studies, what the culture was like, so from these stories spins out, especially for early learners, from these stories spins out other subject areas for learning. And if you hear these stories and you start to, your mind starts to work, starts to go into overdrive, and you start thinking up ideas, join the Discord and share your ideas. We can catalog these ideas pretty well in the Discord. When we catalog these ideas, it makes it easier for us to go back and add ideas to the first draft of the African-centered curriculum. Just trying to fix something right here while I'm talking. Okay. So, make sure to join the Discord today. So let's begin. At the first sign of morning, Jabane and his elder brother Mandla set out for a day of hunting. Mist, like soft smoke, swirled in the valley below, hiding the stream that lay like a sluggish snake in its sandy bed. "I'm after an impala today," said Mandla excitedly. "I'd be happy with just a bush buck," said Jabane, adjusting the strap of the shoulder bag. Adjusting the strap of the shoulder bag he carried. As they tramped their way through the scratchy long grass and dry spiky bushes, the mist lifted, the sun shone brightly in the clear sky. "There's a clearing over there between the trees," said Jabane. "Let's walk towards it." When they reached the open space, they came across a very strange sight indeed. Large brown red coiled pots had been placed upside down in a straight line on the grass. "What are these pots doing out here in the middle of the bush?" asked Mandla, astounded by what he saw before him. Jabane was fascinated and leaned over to touch them. "Leave them alone, Jabane," warned Mandla nervously. "There's something strange about these pots." "I want to see what is under them," answered Jabane, handling the first one. "See, Mandla, there's nothing under it." Mandla crept a little closer and watched cautiously as Jabane picked up the second pot. All that was under it was the imprint that the mouth of the pot had made on the grass. Confidently, Jabane picked up the next pot and the next, as though playing a game, until he came to the last pot in the row. "What are you afraid of, Mandla?" laughed Jabane. But as he turned the last part in the row, an old woman stood up and stretched. Jabane screamed and stepped backwards, distancing himself from the pots. The woman was stooped with age, and her smiling face bore the lines of one who had spent many, many years wandering the veld, looking for food. She walked right past Jabane and said to Mandla, "Stop shaking like a scared young buck. I won't do you any harm. Come with me, I have something wonderful to show you." But Mandla would have nothing to do with this woman, and he ran away. Then the old woman turned to Jabane. "Come with me, young man," she said to him, urging Jabane to follow her. Jabane followed the old woman as she hacked a path through the dense, spiky veld with an axe. The midday sun scorched their skin, and Jabane grew hot and tired. He was relieved when the old woman eventually stopped in front of a sweet thorn tree. "Young man, take this axe and cut down this tree," said the old woman. Jabane looked up at the size of the tree. It was huge, and it would take him hours, even days, to cut it down. But he was too frightened to disobey her. He lifted the axe, gathered his strength, and struck the tree as hard as he could. With the first strike, a copper-colored ox appeared out of the tree. Jabane couldn't believe what he had seen. "Strike again," urged the woman, smiling. So he struck the sweet thorn again, and a tan-colored cow came out of the tree. With each strike, a bull, cow, goat, or sheep emerged until Jabane was surrounded by animals. "Take these animals home, young boy," said the old woman. "They are yours. I will remain here." Jabane was shocked. "Thank you," he said gratefully, looking at all the livestock. Then he drew the animals together and started herding them back home towards his father's village. When he passed the clearing, he found his brother Mandla asleep against the trunk of a tree. "Awoo, Jabane, where did all these animals come from?" asked Mandla, jumping up. "Walk with me and I will explain," said Jabane. As they drove the animals homeward, Jabane told his elder brother what had happened, arousing great jealousy in Mandla's heart. The journey through the bushy veld was slow, and after a while, Mandla said, "I need water. Let's leave the animals to graze and see if there's a stream or spring nearby." They climbed over a rocky outcrop and were on the edge of a steep and treacherous cliff when Mandla shouted to Jabane, "There's a trickle down there. Let me down with a rope. I'm parched." Jabane skillfully made a rope out of creepers and lowered his brother down from the rocky outcrop high above the little stream. When Mandla had quenched his thirst, Jabane hoisted him back up and said, "My turn now." Mandla led Jabane down to the rocks beside the stream. While Jabane was drinking and washing his face in the water, an evil thought came to Mandla. He threw the edge of the creeper rope over the cliff and smiled to himself as he ran back to the animals. Mandla knew that his brother could never climb out of the ravine on his own. He found himself a strong stick, and Mandla drove the animals home, away from the setting sun. Jabane and Mandla's father ran out to greet him when he appeared on the outskirts of the village. "Mandla, where did you get all these animals?" Mandla told them about the old woman. "But where is Jabane?" asked the boy's mother. "He took another route home," lied Mandla. "Isn't he home yet?" "We've not seen him," said the boy's mother, "and it will soon be dark." "He can take good care of himself," said his father. "Perhaps he's still out hunting." Darkness fell and covered the village. Then when it lifted the next morning, the woman set out to draw water from the sluggish stream in the valley. A surprise greeted them at the water, and they returned in a hurry to their husbands. "We've heard the honeybird calling in a tree near the stream. Quick, follow it and fetch some honey for us." The boys' father and some village men ran after the honey god, keeping their eyes on the bird's white tail feathers as it made pathways through the sky. The bird led them in the thick bush. Some men were tired and said, "There's no honey. We're going home." But at that point, the honey guide flapped his wings mightily and screeched his call, whit purr, whit purr, urging the men to follow. As the bird hovered above a rocky outcrop, Jabein's father stood still and listened. I hear a faint cry from the ravine below, he said. Listen, sounds like my son. Jabein, he shouted. Honey guy flapped his wings and then took off, swooping down into the rocky ravine below, landing next to Jabein. Jabein's father looked over the rocky edge and saw his son. He quickly made a rope out of creepers, let it down, and hoisted Jabein up to safety. If it weren't for the honey guy, we might have lost you, sighed Jabein's father, putting his arm around his son. As they walked home, Jabein told his father what had happened. Your brother will be punished, he said. His jealousy has made him act foolishly. But by the time the villagers arrived home, Mandla had disappeared. He had heard that his lost brother had been found, and he knew that Jabein would tell his story. Jabein took care of his cattle, sheep, and goats. Not only did he prosper, but he remembered his parents in their old age, took good care of them. So this is the part of where they tell us about, a certain item or certain items in the story, and so we're gonna look at the honey guide. Right, the little honey guide is found mostly in Africa. Features quite commonly in popular African myths and folk tales. Some species are known to lead men or animals, such as the familiar honey badger or ratel, to the hives of wild bees by making chattering noises and flying in the direction of the bees' nest. Once the hive has been raided, the honey guide eats what is left. It feeds on bees' wax and grubs, and the honey guide has a tough skin and a special membrane over its eyes so that they are protected against being stung by the angry bees. Although it is more common in Africa's woodlands and thornveld, the honey guide may also be seen in our own gardens and parks. So you see right there, we learn a little more about this bird that's common in Africa and common in African myths and folktales. This is what I'm saying. Our young learners will be able to, look at this bird more closely in science class. They can draw this bird in art class, right? So, there's these stories can be the basis oftentimes for the learning of our young learners. And as our young learners get older, they'll then start taking on the knowledge base required to solve the problems in African communities. You guys hold on a second, let me grab some water. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. I had to grab some water. Should have grabbed it before the show and didn't. If you're here, make sure you give the video, the episode, a thumbs up. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe. Click the bell so you'll be notified when I'm uploading or presenting new content. And if you're returning and you've done all those things, I thank you once again for doing those things. So the next story we're reading is called A Test of Fire. This is from the Sotho people, right? The Test of Fire from the Sotho people. So again, the student gets to, in geography and social studies. They get to study the people, the customs. In language, they could study some simple terms, you know, simple conversational terms of the Sotho people. So again, you see where the curriculum starts to fill itself out just based on some of these stories, some of the food they're going to talk about, some of the animals they're going to refer to, right? You can see how the curriculum can be built around such stories. So the test of fire from the Sotho people. Tortoise crept along a sandy bald patch of grass, heading for the shade. Occasionally she paused, reflecting on how far she had traveled. And of course, every now and then, she was sidetracked by the new leaves on shrubs, made succulent by the first summer rains. Zebra and wildebeest congregated in the spiky acacia shadows, trying to escape the searing heat of the midday sun. Even the warthog retreated from the oppressive heat that hovered in the air. Energized by the shade of the trees, Tortoise crept further and further into the undergrowth, only noticing Duiker when he stood up from his leafy bed. "Sorry to have startled you, Duiker," said Tortoise politely. "It's so cool here." "I prefer to stay here all day," said Duiker. "I dare not be seen during the day. Crowned Eagle has a nestling to feed." "So you're not very brave, Duiker," teased Tortoise. "Well, you're not very fast, are you, Tortoise?" teased Duiker in return. "Slow but sure," laughed Tortoise. "Excuse me," interrupted the warthog. "There was only one way to test courage, and that's by fire." "He's right," said Tortoise flippantly. "Let us put our courage to the test, Duiker." Duiker hesitated, knowing he was terrified of flames. But then he realized how cowardly it would seem to the other animals of the veld. So he agreed, but only half-heartedly. The challenge attracted a great deal of interest, and the grassland inhabitants crowded around. "I'll dig a hole in which we can build a fire," volunteered the warthog. "And I'll also ask the spring hares and moles to help me. We're all expert excavators." "We'll collect the firewood," said a guinea fowl. "And we'll help too," said the leader of the turtle doves from his perch overhanging the gathering. While all the activity continued around him, Duiker took very little interest. He went back to his cool place in the wooded area and lay down lazily in the shade. Tortoise nibbled at a few juicy leaves for a while and then rested too. It was only when the bundle of thorny firewood was placed beside the hole that Tortoise realized that the test of her courage was soon to take place. Duiker, pleaded Tortoise. "Please let me go first." Duiker was relieved and readily agreed. "I'm going to get some sleep now," said Tortoise. "I'll see you in the morning." Tortoise crept home and waited for night to hide the colors and shapes of the grassland. Put a white moon rose in the sky, the color of ash, and gave her just enough light to scuffle unseen through the bushy undergrowth. She quickly dug a burrow that led out of the hole the animals had made for the fire, and then hid the entrance to the tunnel with branches. Then she went home to sleep. The next morning, Duiker and the grassland birds and beasts had already gathered at the hole by the time Tortoise arrived. "Thought your courage had failed you," laughed Duiker. "You never were very brave." Watched by all the animals, Tortoise went back down into the hole and then shouted in a muffled voice, "You can start the fire now." Duiker threw the firewood gathered by the birds into the dark hole and trampled it down with his hooves. Then in an elated mood, he rubbed firestones together, causing the first sparks. The wood in the pit hissed and sparked as it surrendered to the fire. The grassland animals and birds stepped back to avoid the smoke and heat of the soaring flames. Poor Tortoise They sighed. But long before the flames could reach her, Tortoise had cunningly crept into the burrow she had prepared the night before. She had brought 2 seed pods with her, and when they were heated by the flames, they exploded in the fire. Tortoise's eyes have popped, wailed the warthog. She should never have volunteered to go first, said the guinea fowl. Duiker enthusiastically fed the hungry fire all day. It gobbled the dry sticks and branches, and by dusk, it had burned itself out. Duiker went home, curled up on his soft leafy bed, and fell asleep. Tortoise slept well too. Early the next morning, she crept back along the tunnel of the fire pit. After testing that the ashes were cool, Tortoise rolled around in the remains of the fire until her shell was completely covered with the ashen dust. Then she lay on her back with her eyes closed. Duiker rose early and looked for a wild olive branch. He tore off a stick and sharpened it until it had a fine point. "I'll never have to listen to that tortoise again," he said, peering into the pit. He struck Tortoise's shell harshly. Tortoise slowly rolled over and answered, "Duiker, I warned you that my courage could stand the test of fire." Duiker was stunned into silence. The birds and the beasts couldn't believe that Tortoise had survived the awful heat of the fire. "Now it's your turn, Duiker," said the warthog. "I'm not afraid," replied Duiker. "How good of you all to come and witness my victory." Suddenly Tortoise said, "Please, would you help me dig a new hole? Duiker should have a larger and more comfortable hole than I have." The warthog led the work party once again, and they dug all through the day. The next morning, before the dew had evaporated in the glow of the sun, Duiker went down into the deep, deep hole. Alas, no tunnel had been built. The firewood was put in position in the pit. It was lit, and soon tongues of flames licked the air. A popping sound was heard. "Duiker's eyes," said the warthog sadly. Tortoise kept the fire smoldering all day and went home at sunset. The next day, when the acacias and wild olive trees came to life with the chorus of grassland birds, Tortoise went to the hole. Duiker's horns were the only parts which had not been burnt by the scalding flames. So Tortoise cleaned them, shunned them, and made them into musical instruments. That day on, Tortoise's song sounded through the grasslands as the wind whisked them to motion. Poor Duiker, he died so young as the flames engulfed him. How sad. So, I mean, there's morals in that story, right? You know the old saying, pride goes before the fall? You know, that applies to that story. That's good for kids to learn the moral of the story. The other obvious moral of the story is that people cheat, pay attention, etc. We learn of new animals, the warthog, etc. in this story, and we learn about the blue duiker. This part of the story tells us a little about the blue duiker. The timid blue duiker is the smallest antelope in southern Africa. By the way, I've never heard of a duiker before. Right? And right now, I've just read something where I'm reading something that teaches me, as an adult learner, what a duiker is. It's an antelope in southern Africa, and prefers to stay hidden among thick bush or leafy forests. It ventures out mostly at night, but is usually found alone. The blue duiker feeds on leaves and fruit, particularly its favorite wild figs. Its main predators are eagles, pythons, and of course, man. Both males and females have horns, and their gray-brown coat enables them to be well camouflaged in their bushy, surrounding. So again, when we talk about curriculum, something we never discussed before, but when we're talking about these animals, we haven't before this story, for now, talked about their natural predator, which also takes us into food chain, right? What's the food chain, right, in this part of the continent? And so our young learners will learn not only about the animals, they'll learn about the ecosystem, the hierarchy, the order, right, in those areas. And that's important to know, by the way. For example, let's say a scientist goes into a lab and he or she comes up with a way to eradicate all cockroaches, right? You need to know what happens. How does the ecosystem swing if you took out all cockroaches? There's a price to be paid, and you need to know what will that price be. In fact, there's, when I was in grad school, there was some studies I read up on and worked on where they had created this gene that produces a toxin for, I believe it was a silkworm, right? So they put this gene in this corn, and so when the silkworm ate the corn, which will destroy the crop, this gene, they devoured, parts of this corn, and this gene that inside the intestines or the stomachs of the silkworm, it caused like a hole to form or something, right? And it's been a long time, so I don't remember all the details, but it created like a hole in the stomach, thus killing the silkworm. The problem with that is when they killed this silkworm was a predator to some other bug. And now this other bug became prevalent in this region. And this other bug was worse than the effects of the silkworm eating the corn. Our young learners can learn ecosystems, learn orders, learn predation, right? What's the natural predator? And also can learn, by putting these things together, what happens if we lose, what happens if we lose all the blue duochrys, for example, right? So again, more opportunity for our young learners to learn some invaluable information about where they're from. By the time you read this story and then you do your work, your writing, your science, your history, your social studies, right? Later on, you'll add politics. What's the politics in these regions? Right? By the time your languages, you learn basic conversational, tools and from these different groups. By the time you do that, don't you think you have a student who's more immersed in their African tradition? Don't you think by the time you've gone through this type of stuff and built up into the learning, the knowledge base for the higher grade levels, don't you think you would have a group of people where you can rely on their leadership in the future because of how much they're influenced by and tied to their understanding and their association with the continent? This is what we're trying to work towards. We need everyone on board to speak up, to Participate actively. So don't just come to the Discord and then you go missing. We need you there. We need you present. We need you actually taking time. Like, oh, I'm reading these. So like, by the time I'm finished, I'm almost halfway through this book. By the time I'm finished with this book, I'll have enough homework to do in terms of making up lesson plans, say for science, just on the animals in this book. I'll have enough work to do for folks to say, well, okay, we learned some stories from the Zulu people. Let's go find out what's the main language of the Zulu people, and let's put together some language classes that have like basic, simple, vowels and etc. of that language. Let's teach the children how to greet one another. Hello, how are you? What day of the week is it? What month of the year is it? What are our numbers? 1 to 10 at least, or 1 to 100. You guys can help with that. That shouldn't be one person doing that work. You can help. I'm reading the story for you. You can sit down with pen and paper and start writing out the names of the animals that we come across. You can start doing some research on those animals. You could do a light level research on just, what they are, how big they grow, blah, 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 blah. And then later on, we can start doing actually deep dives in Pelos or something. And learn about some studies or whatever that was done on these animals. And get more in-depth knowledge, right? This is how we are going to proceed with this curriculum. The next story we come to is Daughter of the Moonlight. This is a Xhosa people's story, right? Daughter of the Moonlight by the Xhosa, right? Look at all these weeds, sighed a young woman as her hoe hit the earth with a thud, uprooting a stubborn patch of weeds. Her husband had lost interest in her because she had not yet had a child, and she carried the sadness with her as she worked in her garden. Suddenly, a beautiful green and yellow finch landed near her and offered her some berries, saying, "Eat these before you eat your food. You shall have the child you so long for." The young woman was so happy that she offered the bird her bead necklace. But all the bird wanted was river sand, which she carefully collected for him. In time, she gave birth to a beautiful daughter whom she named Tanga Lim Libo, which means single shoot of a pumpkin. But the mother wanted to keep her child a secret, so she hid her baby. When the little girl was old enough to work in the fields, she would do so only by the light of the moon and stay hidden in her mother's hut by day. One night, her father and his hunting party passed by the river. He saw this beautiful girl and watched her as she returned home with the water she had drawn. He ran after her and followed her into the hut of his wife. "Why did you not tell me about our beautiful daughter?" he asked his wife. "I would like to arrange a feast so that we may celebrate Tanga's growth into a woman." The day of the celebration arrived, but Tanga would not leave her hut until the moon rose in the sky. From the time he saw her in the moonlight, Impunzi, the son of Jebi, wanted her to be his wife. But Jebi said, "Impunzi, how can you be married to a woman who refuses to go out during the day? How will she get her work done?" When his mother saw how disappointed Impunzi was, she offered to help with the work, and so the parents agreed to the marriage. Cattle were paid to Jebi, and as was their tradition. Tanga's father sent a cow with Tanga, and she moved to the home of her mother-in-law. Everyone was pleased when Tanga gave birth to a son, but although she worked hard, Jebi continued to try to persuade her to go out into the sunlight. One day, when Mpunzi was away on a hunting trip, Jebi ordered Tanga to fetch water for him. "I'll go tonight," she said, "when the sun has set behind the western hills." "Go at once, Tanga," he said sternly. Obediently, Tanga handed her baby to her helper, Nono, and sobbing bitterly, she made her way to the river in the blinding light of the sun. She sat on the riverbank and leaned over the water with her ladle. As she was drawing water, she felt the ladle slip from her hands and fall deep down into the muddy depths of the river. "I'll try the water jar," she said aloud, reaching out over the water. As soon as the jar went into the water, it also slipped from her hands and fell down, down, down. She then used the corner of her cloak, but that also fell down, down into the murky water. This time she fell down with it. Jebi waited and waited for his daughter-in-law, Tanga, to return with his water. He sent Nono to look for her, but all she could see were Tanga's footprints in the wet mud beside the water. "Oh, I have been selfish and self-willed," Jebi cried. "Look what I've done." He looked sadly at Tanga's baby, who cried and cried. Nothing could soothe him. "I know what I'll do," Jebi said. "I'll drive the cow that Tanga brought with her to the river, slaughter it, and offer it to the river in exchange for Tanga." So he went down to the water, and as he did this, he cried, "Take this rather than our beautiful Tanga." Nothing happened. The river flowed on as before. But then he thought he heard a whisper, "Tell my parents that the river has taken me." Jebi was very worried. He could never confess to Tanga's parents what had happened. That night, Jebi fell into a troubled sleep. The baby would not settle without his mother, so Nono took the child out so that he would not disturb everyone. She walked by the river singing, "Daughter of the moonlight, your child cries all night." Suddenly the waters of the river seemed to part, and Tanga came to take her child. She comforted him until the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon. But Tanga warned Nono, "Never tell anyone the secret. Say that the child has grown strong and healthy by eating berries." So Nono crept quietly back to the hut and with the child strapped to her back. 3 nights, the same thing happened until it was time for Mpunzi to return from his hunting trip. He returned home happy, laden with fresh meat for his family. He was very angry when he heard the news of his wife, but was relieved to see his son looking healthy and strong. "What has the boy been eating?" he asked Nono. "Berries," said Nono, hesitant. "Go and get some," said Mpunzi. But when the child was given the fruit to eat, he refused to take it, and Nono was forced to tell Mpunzi the puzzling truth. That night, Mpunzi and his friends went to the river by moonlight. He tied a rope around his waist and hid near the river, while his friends took the other end of the rope and hid behind some rocks. Nono walked up and down the riverbank with the baby and sang her song, "Daughter of the moonlight, your child cries all night." "What has this boy been eating?" he asked Nono. Oh, sorry. Picked the wrong thing. As usual, Tanga appeared and took the child from her loyal helper. Mpunzi leapt up and grabbed them both. His friends pulled on the rope and tried to haul them up the bank, but the river rose up and flowed over its banks. The men were afraid of a flood, so they dropped the rope and fled. And the high waters of the river went down, and Tanga disappeared once again. When Mpunzi returned home, his father, Jebi, confessed that he had not sent the message to Tanga's parents. So Mpunzi asked his ox to take the message, but he would not move. He asked his dog, but the dog just barked. Only the cock would agree to take the message. Tanga's father received the news. He drove the fat ox back to Tanga's new home. The cock perched on his back all the way home. Again that night, they offered a sacrifice on the bank of the river. Nona walked up and down with the child singing the song. When Tango appeared, her parents took her by the hand, led her out of the water, and gave her to Mponzi. The river rose a little, then subsided, and then flowed as smoothly as before. Jebe learned a great deal from his experience and was content to accept the fact that his daughter-in-law would never be anyone other than a daughter of the moonlight. So there's a couple of things that you could pick up that's of interest in there, right? The dowry, the business of marriage, right? Not only is it the tradition, but it's also the business of marriage. And there's a lesson in the business of marriage for people nowadays. When you unite with someone else in what is called marriage, it's supposed to be as much of a business move as it is an emotional. It's supposed to be the transfer of some wealth involved. Right? Traditionally, that's what it was. It was a transfer of wealth. Back in the days when a man had a bunch of kids, right? As you know, most people long ago did. Shoot, my grandparents had 10 kids. On one side. On the other side, my grandparents had 17 children. Right? When you had boys, you were grateful because these boys are going to work the field with you. But that's a long process, right? When you had girls, you were much more pleased because girls, especially if they were beautiful, especially if they were, goddesses, so to speak, they can fetch, a bunch of cattle, a bunch of seed, sometimes land. So now you're not just working the land to feed your family, but you're working the land to sell for a profit. In today's world, a lot of people tend to engage in marriage based off of feelings of love and lust and what have you. And that's why so many of folks are out here living raggedy. Because you didn't consider that people are supposed to bring something to the table. You understand? So this brings us to the section of this story. And I really like how this book is put together with these little bits of information where they're talking about the wedding gift, the dowry, right? The traditional Xhosa bride left her own family and lived with her husband's mother and father after her marriage. She was expected to work hard and obey certain rules in the home of her new parents-in-law. After some time, her husband built a home of his own with the help of the other men and women in the community, Ubuntu. At the time of her marriage, the bride's father gave her a cow, which she took with her to her new home. And it was hers to keep. When the original cow became too old to be of any use, one of its calves took its place. Now think about in traditional Africa, the importance of a cow, right? Think about all that it could bring to you, right? Super important. You're talking wealth there. You're talking the ability to even feed your family. Right? The cow gets too old, one of her calves will take the place. These are things that our youth need to learn. Now, let me pause here for a quick station idea, and on the other side, I'll come back and read probably one more story, and we'll call that a day. So I'll be right back.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is DAX. You tune into the Harsh Reality Podcast, providing you with social commentary on the news affecting our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
And here we are. We're back, and we're about to read most likely our last story of the night. Before I do that, I want to thank, there's a few of you who are here listening, it seems like. I want to thank you guys. If you're new here, if you happen to be new here, I want you to make sure to subscribe to the channel. Give the video a thumbs up. Click the bell so you will be notified as to when I'm on live again, when I've uploaded some new content. We are reading these African mythology stories. And this is the second time I've done this. The first time I showed you guys how important these stories are, as they frame the basis of early education curriculum. These stories are so full of information about different parts and different tribes within the continent, right? They talk about the flora and the fauna in the region, right? That our children can learn the flora and the fauna, right, of these regions. They can learn the greetings, how to count, etc., of these different groups from the continent. And I know I'm repeating this stuff because it's so important. What I'd like to put out there as a challenge to anyone who's willing to jump on the Discord, I've posted the link before. If someone could repost it again, join the Discord. The challenge I have for you: you join the Discord, ask me how to get your hands on this book, and then I'd like whoever accepts the challenge, go through the book and pull out all the animals, pull out all the morals, pull out even the names, and see if they have meaning, as African names tend to do. Let's dissect these stories, and let's figure out how best to spread these stories into other subject areas: science, politics, history, geography, etc. Right? And that will be huge. That will go a long way in our African-centered curriculum. As a matter of fact, once that is done, we can then really start to focus in on books that come from or describe the Sotho people, the Xhosa people, the Zulu people, etc., etc., etc. And now we will really have the books that are best options for our early learners, and that will really get us in the right direction for the books that we're going to use later on for the advanced learners, or as children advance through the curriculum, the books for them. So that's my call to action today in this episode. If you like what you're hearing and you feel what you're hearing, join the Discord. The link is in the chat. Join the Discord. You know, depending on when you're listening to the playback of this episode, if the link is no good, just reach out to me. Post in the comment section, hey, can I get the link for the Discord? I'll gladly post it for you. I'll gladly post it for you. When you enter, you decide what you're there for. You're there just for the podcast as a fan, that's fine. Or does what I'm saying resonate with you and you want to work with the curriculum? Right? You want to work with the curriculum. If you want to work with the curriculum, then this is the call to action right now. Go through this book, pick it to pieces. Research the Sotho, the Xhosa, the Zulu, etc. Research with pictures. The animals that they talk about. Let's get full descriptions, classifications, etc. All right? That's what we need. In the chat room, I see we have some activity. And it is Sister Renee Moore. PCU, sis, haven't seen you in these parts in a while. Sister Renee says, I read to my child every night. These stories are short enough to incorporate into our nighttime routine. I definitely like a copy of this book, and it's yours. You asked, you will receive. I'll get it to you through the Discord. Okay? And that's what we need to be doing. You can't sit by and hear these kind of things going down, these stories being read, and not feel something. And not want to say, hey, I want the children that I have or the children around me to feel something too. And as the sister said, the stories are pretty short. But they unwind so much more. They unwind so much more in other subject and knowledge areas that you can build this curriculum around. Join us with the link. Come to the Discord. Let's put in this work. Sister Renee says, LOL. I know. I'm glad I could make it tonight. I'm glad you could make it tonight as well. All right. Hope you enjoyed the stories that you've heard. This is the last story for tonight. I'm still shy of the halfway point of this book. So I'm sure there's still a lot of gems, right, to be pulled from this book, right? So stay tuned for when I do this again. Probably next Thursday, I'll do this again. I'll read a couple more stories. By the way, this Saturday, new episode again. I won't do a film this Saturday. I think I'm going to reserve that maybe once a month or something. But I will do an episode. I'll probably read some Proverbs. Join me, and the others for the readings of the Proverbs, right? Again, those Proverbs are important too, as far as curriculum groups. Okay? You can help pull out the pertinent Proverbs, right? And we could do Yoruba, we could do Akan, we could do whichever group we can get our hands on books of Proverbs, we can do that. And we can make all this one cohesive thing, right? We could do, make this one cohesive thing for our students. I see KW Dawn 7 is in the room. KW Dawn 7, I haven't seen you in a minute. He gives me greetings. He says listening and multitasking. It's KW Dawn 7 and Sister Renee, for example, are the kind of people that you would hear me and the pro-black perspective Onitase talking about, right? You, like Onitase would say, you can be playing a video game. I think I mentioned this before on the show. You could be playing a video game, and instead of listening to the gunshots or whatever, the high-speed chase, whatever you're doing in the game, I mean, how often you really need to hear Hayukin? Right? Instead of doing that, or whatever it is you're doing. Maybe you're exercising, maybe you're washing dishes. You can tune into our shows. Bit of Medicine Podcast, right? Yours truly. You could tune into the Pro-Black Perspective, the Harsh Reality Podcast, the Queen's Council, and you could be doing something else at the same time. All right? But peace to you, KW Don 7. Good to see you again. All right? So, to our last story. It's called The Two Sisters of the Maluti Mountains. Two Sisters of the Maluti Mountains. Again, geography. This is from the Sotho people. All right? Chief Boulain, his wife and two treasured daughters lived in the foothills of the Maluti Mountains. Everywhere they went, people marveled at the girls' astonishing beauty, and they were considered the most beautiful throughout the mountain kingdom. Chief Boulain was also very proud of his magnificent cattle. Which grew fat on millet and increased in number every year. One of the elder daughters said, "I would like to taste some millet." "No," said her father, "it is the cow's food." "You know that we don't eat millet," said the girl's mother. "On no occasion should you eat it." The next morning, when they were left alone, the headstrong elder daughter ground some of the millet kernels on a stone and then boiled them in a pot over the fire. Hunger gnawed at her tummy. Before the millet porridge was even cooked, she took some for herself and gave some to her sister to taste. "It's so delicious," she said, sampling the porridge. Suddenly the girls noticed that the millet porridge was boiling over. It bubbled and bubbled right out of the pot onto the floor, and they could do nothing to stop it. The younger daughter scolded her sister, saying, "Now you know why our parents do not want us to cook this millet. They'll be very angry with us when they return." The elder sister was terrified. "I will run away," she said hastily. I will run away, she said. Hastily, she threw her blanket around her shoulders and fled. As she ran, the rocky ridges of the Maluti Mountains rose up to a brilliant blue sky, which was untouched by a single cloud. She ran across the dusty footpaths in the heat of the searing sun as fast as a guinea fowl, not daring to look back. Her heart beat as fast as the streams that flow after the snow has melted on the mountaintops. Suddenly, a dark shadow loomed across the path in front of her. She was so afraid that she fell to the ground, covering herself with her blanket. Then she saw that it was a black eagle, the mighty and powerful bird whom the mountain people called Mofameli. Although his feathers were as black as a moonless night, the young girl remembered that he was known to be kind and gentle. She cried out, "Bird of the mountains, please rescue me. Our parents told us not to cook millet as it is cattle feed. We did not listen. Help me, Mofameli." And so the great black eagle swooped down, clasped the young girl firmly in his strong talons, and lifted her up, up, up as he climbed the valley that led towards the very top of the mountain. There he placed her gently on the soft grass in a quiet and lonely place where there were no people. Then the great bird flew away. The girl was heartbroken at being stranded in a strange place. But when she looked up, she noticed smoke rising gently in the distance. She ran towards it, and on the other side of a small clump of trees, she found a group of men cooking meat over a fire. She tried to hide behind a tree, but one of the men, Masilo, got up and shouted, "There is the most beautiful girl that I have ever seen. Catch her quickly before she disappears." Man, cupcake. But his companions just stared at him in amazement. Though he could certainly hear Masilo had, up until that very moment, never spoken a word in his life. After giving her food, Masilo took Bulani's daughter to meet his father, who was a chief. Masilo's father was so pleased to hear his son speak that he gave permission for their marriage. Masilo and his beautiful wife lived happily in their village and had 2 children. After the birth of their second child, Masilo's wife asked her father-in-law if she may visit her family. They journeyed for many days until at last they could see Chief Bulani's village in the distance. The girl, dressed in her fine new skin blanket and beads, ran to greet her parents. She was relieved to find that her parents had forgiven her, and they received her with kindness and great joy. "See what Masilo's father has given you as a bride price, father?" she said, presenting her father with 40 head of cattle. "These are the gifts we have brought for you," said Masilo as he offered his mother-in-law a fine long blanket made from jackal skins and clay pots and sleeping mats. Daughter's homecoming brought great rejoicing. Sheep were slaughtered, and there was a great celebration among the people. Then it was time for Chief Bulani's daughter to return to the home of her husband. Her parents were sad that their beloved daughter lived so far away. But there was one person who was very pleased indeed: Chief Bulani's younger daughter. Jealousy boiled inside her like the millet that boiled and wouldn't stop. She had heard about the beautiful black eagle that had led her sister to a handsome husband, and she wanted the same for herself. In her anger, she ran away and took the well-worn path along the foothills that join the Maludi Mountains before they rise up to reach the sky. As she was running with the dust swirling at her feet, she saw a large shadow ahead of her on the path. She looked up, and recognizing the great bird, she cried out as her sister had done, "Bird of the mountains, please rescue me. Our parents told us not to cook millet, as it is cattle feed, but we do not listen. Help me, Martha Mellet." But Black Eagle scolded her, "Young daughter of Bulane, it is not millet that has caused you anxiety. It is jealousy. It never stops boiling inside of you. You cannot escape it. It is with you wherever you go." With outstretched arms, she begged and begged the mountain bird to take her with him. Then the bird, who had been hovering above her, shuttered out the sun, swooped down, and snatched her up, taking her into the blue heights above the rugged mountains. Excitement grew inside the girl as they soared high above the valley. Below were her father's cattle like grains of sand on the dusty scrubland. She couldn't wait to reach the place where her sister lived. Suddenly, the Black Eagle dropped to the ground, released the grip of his sharp talons, and left her in a quiet, lonely place not far from a little lake. The girl could hear Martha Mele in the distance and screamed out to the Black Eagle, Martha Mele, take me home." But the eagle was on his way home to his nest on a rocky ridge in the Maludi Mountains. He ignored her desperate cries for help. Distraught and afraid, the young girl ran along the river that flowed from the little lake, searching for a place where she could cross it. After 3 long days, she found a tree trunk that bridged the water and crossed to the other side. As she walked through the long grass on the water's edge, she thought to herself, "That big black bird of the mountains has brought me trouble. I'll have him killed." Then she came across the village of her mother's brother and his wife. They welcomed her, and her vengeful thoughts were lost for a while. "This girl's father should have found her a husband," said her uncle. "Now we shall have to find a man for this beautiful young girl." When her uncle found her a husband, Chief Bulani's younger daughter would not look at him. He's so ugly, she shouted. My sister's husband, is very handsome. And the next man was too old. My sister's husband is young, snapped the young girl. No man seemed good enough. Eventually, her uncle said angrily to her, "You think that no man is fit to be your husband? Away with you." And so the young girl fled her uncle's village, and in her distress, she cried out to Black Eagle, Martha Melly, take me home. Take me home." But the Black Eagle of the mountains did not come. So she walked for many, many days until she reached her home, exhausted. Chief Polani welcomed his daughter and gave her food and fine clothes to wear. "There is a man who wishes to marry you," he told his daughter. "Will he give you 40 cows?" she asked. "Yes," said her father. "And fine clothes and beads for me?" "Yes," said Chief Polani. "And a jackal skin blanket?" "Yes," said her father. "Then I will marry him," said the young girl. "But Martha Melly, the great black bird of the mountains, has caused me great pain. He must be killed. Only then will I marry." So Martha Melly, the great black bird with the kind heart, was killed. When jealousy brewed again in the young girl's heart, like bubbling millet, the bird was not around to see it. Several morals to that story, right? Again, good stuff for young learners. And I may have mentioned this last week when I did part 1 of this, but the thing that they've done in, say, America, for example, is they make children into babies. And so the fairy tales that you hear in America that came from Germany and, from Europe or whatever, are way harsher than what is learned in America, right? Even something like Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, right? That has a real bad story attached to it that we used to recite as kids back home. The bad part and all. But in America, they kind of, they give it that gooey center, right? They make it soft. The reality is that fairy tales traditionally were always some harsh stories. There was death, there was murder, there was lies, right? And you want your children, again, when you talk about rites of passage, you gotta start your kids out early on, giving them that responsibility. They can handle it, trust. So some of these stories might seem like, wow, these are kids' stories? Yes. Because they expose the child to the society that the child is gonna live in. It's realism, right? They don't shy away from it. Again, as is the case in this book, they're going to give us a lesson on the Mountain Kingdom. Right? Again, more geography. There's social studies here. Right? There's the ability to learn simple words in the language. Right? So, the Mountain Kingdom, once known as Basuto land, Lesotho, surrounded by majestic mountains, is the traditional home of the Sotho people of Southern Africa. It is one of the smallest countries in Africa, and most of Lesotho's towns, including Maseru, its capital, are situated in the lowlands to the west of the country. To the east of the lowlands lie the often inaccessible Maluti Mountains, or highlands, which cover 2/3 of Lesotho. This area rises more as it continues eastward, ending in the magnificent Drakensberg Mountains. Drakensberg, that's those, you know who named that, right? Which are often snow-capped. And perhaps because much of this beautiful land is so mountainous, many rural folk still use the tough little Basuto ponies as a means of transport. Again, chock full of lessons, like real life lessons, right? And learnings that the young learners can receive. Again, I can post it again. You can join the Discord using that link that I just posted a few, and someone else posted. Yeah, KWAZ Radio posted before as well. Right? You can use that link, join the Discord. It's free. And the way things are going with the Discord, you're gonna have a number of pro-black, black conscious books, as well as a number of books in other fields like STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, that are going to be up there. I have hundreds of books, I tell you no lie. And it's just that I'm going to have to upgrade the Discord so that I could get all these file sizes uploaded, right? The free Discord only allows, I think, 8 megabyte size files to be uploaded. I've got some that are way over, right? 3-4 times that. And as I'm saying that, you know, I never really say anything, but as you see scrolling across the screen, it says donate to the show. That's the Cash App, $BitterMeds with a Z at the end. BITTERMEDZ. Donate to the show. Donations will go directly to upgrading the Discord, right? That's what that money will be used for now. Upgrade the Discord. And I think the upgrade for the Discord is only really like $100. So it's nothing for a few people to donate to the show. You'll immediately see the benefits of it, because when I start posting all the books I have that you'll be able to go and download for yourselves for free, it'll be all worth it. Okay? So do that today. Donate to the show. Right? So that we can get stuff really rolling with this Discord. In any event, that's been the show for today. I'll be back again on Saturday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm probably going to be reading some Proverbs that night. Okay? If you want to have a movie night again in February, by all means, you guys suggest to me a black film that I could find on a streaming service, Prime or Netflix, right? Suggest to me a black film and I'll set it up for maybe the last Saturday in the month, right? To show a film. I will wait to see what you guys suggest. There's no more activity in the chat room, so I will call that a night. I appreciate you guys for listening. This has been the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.